All right, hi everyone. This is Nicholas Cooley, music director and conductor of the Lake Union Civic Orchestra, and we're really happy to have our guest soloist here for our final concert of the 2021-22 season, Dr. Yurin Kim. And welcome, Yurin.
Hi, thanks for having me. Great to be here. Great to play this awesome piece with a really fun orchestra. And so I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Kim joined CW 2 years ago. She's one of our newer faculty members, and she's the director of keyboard studies, and she's just done a lot of great work. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about how you got to Washington State?
Sure. First of all, I love it here. It's so beautiful. Community is great. I'm surrounded by mountains. I lived in a place where I didn't see mountains often. So it's a big scenic change, which everybody in my family are enjoying. We moved during pandemic, oddly, ironically enough. So it's been a bit wild to say the least. We were in Indiana before this. Before that, we were in Long Island, New York, and we were just. It happened. It happened, and it wasn't really planned. And when it happened, we're both musicians, my husband and I, and our children are children of musicians. So we've been conditioned to be flexible and we love going on adventures. So first it was a fun adventure to start, and now it's our life now. So yeah, it's been a great journey so far.
Yeah, as musicians, we know that sometimes we don't choose the job. Sometimes the job chooses us.
Exactly. Yeah, it's good to have an open mind. But funny thing is I have a Seattle number, which I've had for like 10 years. And I bought my phone because it broke and we were in Portland and no tax there. So I bought it and they told me that I could choose my own area code. And I've always wanted to live in Washington without even having been here. It just looked beautiful. It seemed like my place. So I asked for 206. And so everybody, back in Indiana and New York assumed that I was either born in Washington, but this is really the first time being here, living here. So it was very serendipitous.
Wow, the fate was already written into your cell phone number.
Yeah.
Well, you're joining us for this program I constructed called Thanatology. It's a study of death and three different composers and their impressions about death and how to grapple with it. We're doing Britten's Sinfonia da Requiem, and we're doing Strauss's Death and Transfiguration. And sandwiched in between is this piano solo concerto piece, Liszt's Totentanz. What's your impression on how Liszt treats death in this piece?
Well, I know he was obsessed with the idea of death and um the culture and art around it that inspired by death and so he we see it a lot in the literature too of his writing and people studying his works too about this kind of romanticism of death, right?
Mhm.
um I consider myself a pretty optimistic person, but it is true. I think about that a lot, and so, and I think it's because it's the most human thing that's out of our control, right? Birth
Yes.
and death. And so for artists like Liszt, performer like Liszt to get obsessive about this idea and what it does and the concept of it, it's pretty fascinating. And this piece, it's built around Dies Irae of this kind of very catchy Gregorian tune that anybody could hear it and will, it's an earworm. But the way how he transforms that into different textures, that it sounds different every time you hear it. It's quite fascinating. But I think he had this obsession with how to convey everything that comes around it. It was what struck me, and you could see it definitely vividly and visually through this piece.
And like some other pianists like Rachmaninoff and Beethoven, they were obsessed with this form of variations, to start with something and just get more and more complicated and more virtuosic in the piano. Is that how this is structured?
Yes and no. It starts off with this kind of extremely almost Bartok-like percussive entrance. And actually, Bartok did play this piece a lot. He performed it, and you can see why. But after that intro, it just right off the bat, You know, it's a very athletic piece, and this is my first time performing it actually. So I'm excited, but it's funny because it's a piece that I've always used to play in sections just to see how shape I am in
Yeah.
technically. So it's yeah, it's from beginning to the end. It's like such a I was joking with my colleagues that it's like filming a Marvel movie after doing a lot of independent, like small movement, like micro expressions, and now we're like, okay, you're playing Wonder Woman. Let's do it, martial arts.
One variation where you're having to repeat on one note,
Mhm.
which is, as a pianist, I know this depends on the piano, if it's going to perform or not. So how's that work for you?
I try to prepare for as many variety of instruments. You know, a piano here is pretty easy to play in my studio at school. Piano at home, it's a much heavier Steinway, so I like practicing it on that. But it's the bigger muscles that I prepare because the smaller one, you're never gonna be able to predict it. So when
Yes.
that foundation is set, it should be okay.
Hey, let's talk about some of your other projects. You are a recording artist. You've done a solo album featuring Schnittke and Schumann. And then you and your husband, Brendan, who is a violinist, you've done an album together featuring Dvorak, Janacek, and Grieg. How did you come to these projects?
Well, I did my solo album first. That was my first debut album. That was actually around death, actually. It was the first and last words of Schumann and Schnittke, and I was interested in this kind of what composers sounded like in their very beginning works versus their very last pieces. So they were actually variations too. Schumann's first work, and then his last ghost variations, and it was very fascinating. I was pretty obsessed with that project for a while. And the sound world of Schnittke too is somebody who sounds so different depending on where he is in his lifetime. So
Mhm.
that was fun. And thing about recording, I think we all got a glimpse of that during pandemic. It's a very isolating process of just so here, at all consuming thing. And so when I did that with my husband, it was totally different experience than when I was doing my solo, and it had different air to it, and it's been fun both times. I'm preparing another solo one and a duo one, actually, a different program. But I think programming is so important,
Mhm.
because it keeps every energy together of what your mindset and frame and the sound world it is for that particular album. For Brendan and my debut duo CD was Sound and the Fury, and it was very expressive and emotional, and all those pieces just convey all the human emotions that we go through maybe every other minute or so. And so it's been fun. I like doing recordings because you get to be just soaked into that process for a while. Yeah.
And how about as an artist? Does it harden you or make you better in a different way playing to
Absolutely.
recording versus live?
I think so. It's such a different process, actually. Funny you mention it because for the solo recording, I recorded first in that program and then performed. For the duo, we were performing already on a lot of that program and then finished the season with recording. And it's just certain things that you need to do on stage doesn't quite work on a recording studio because there's no audience, there's no visuals. So it was a totally different experience. And we learned a lot. I'm always learning every different performance and venue even, and the situation, there's always something different that I get out from it. So I think depending on the program to for our next program, I have to right now decide, since the next season and the beyond, to decide, do I want to perform this first or do I want to record this first? Because it was a totally different experience to do that. Yeah.
Everyone should check out this duo CD, The Sound of Fury. Is that The Sound of Fury?
Great. Yeah.
With Brendan Shea and Yerin Kim has received quite a bit of critical acclaim from many, many major news outlets. One other project I want to talk about is this kind of side. You're so busy, and you teach, you record, but you also are concerned about community and social awareness. And you've put together some programs with your students to bring some awareness to issues that you're concerned about.
Yeah, it's important to me. There are a few things that I feel very compelled to devote my energy and time. And I think, as musicians and as citizens, I play piano because I love it. It almost feels sometimes a bit selfish because it's just something I love doing. And so I went through this a lot earlier too about well, if I want to love doing what I do and have a career out of it, I wonder if somebody else can do something with it too. And it's not that it has to be all altruistic at all, by no means, but just feeling that purpose. And I think with everything going on in the world, it's so easy to feel helpless. And I
Mhm.
think that's one of the main things that we all struggle with. And it's a very deep emotion, feeling helplessness. So it was, I guess, doing these projects also comes from that selfishness too, so wanting to feel like, okay, I'm not helpless, we're doing something. And I want my students to all feel and have purpose on what they do. And all my students, they inspire me. My studio, they're so amazing. I bring up an idea and they just dive in. So every projects that we've been doing with my students and my colleagues, and I love collaborating with other areas too. So it's been great to form our individual offerings and make something bigger. It's been amazing. So we did the music and autism series, which I've been working on for a while in different cities where I lived. Whenever I move, we kind of birthed it there with different people in different communities. Here, there's that active community. I mean, Ellensburg, right? It's with us, with the university, and so the community around it, community beyond it. I think it's important for myself and students to feel the connection so that we're not just in our practice rooms doing what we love, which is important too. But I try to get out of that shell a bit.
Wow, it's amazing how much dedication you have to so many different things, Yurin, and we're really looking forward to having you perform with us with the orchestra, which will take place the beginning of next month. Looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it too. Thanks so much, Nick.
Thank you.